Lena's decision to confront injustice in her small-town cafe turned her life into chaos. As a black waitress at Harbor Cafe, she chose to defend Steph Curry, a basketball icon, from cruel accusations, risking her job, reputation, and sense of belonging. The betrayal that followed was devastating, but what came next would shock everyone and change her future forever. Before we dive into this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, let's get started. Harbor Cafe sat at the corner of Riverside's busiest street, a modest but welcoming diner where laughter and the smell of fresh coffee greeted every customer. For 3 years, Lena had been a constant presence here, her radiant smile and knack for remembering everyone's favorite orders making her beloved among the regulars. Her mornings were filled with the clatter of plates, warm greetings, and cheerful conversations. Yet Lena's days were not without challenges. While most customers adored her, some viewed her differently. A young black woman in a small-town diner, constantly proving her worth in a space that sometimes didn't feel entirely hers. That evening, as the cafe bustled with its usual rhythm, the bell above the door jingled, a sound so familiar it almost went unnoticed. Lena looked up, expecting another regular, but her breath caught. Walking in was none other than Steph Curry, the legendary basketball star of the Golden State Warriors. He wore a simple hoodie and sneakers, his demeanor unassuming yet magnetic. The room hushed as whispers spread among the patrons. "Is that really him?" someone murmured. Others craned their necks, their faces a mix of awe and disbelief. Lena froze for a moment. She'd seen him on TV countless times, dominating the court with effortless skill, but never in her wildest dreams did she imagine he'd walk into Harbor Cafe. Gathering herself, she adjusted her apron and approached his table, her heart racing. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "What can I get for you?" Steph smiled, a calm warmth in his expression. "Just a black coffee and whatever pie you have today." Lena returned to the counter to prepare Steph's order, her mind racing. The cafe was abuzz with whispers, the usually warm atmosphere now charged with excitement and tension. Regulars glanced over their coffee cups, sneaking peeks at the global star sitting in their small-town diner. She carefully placed a steaming cup of black coffee and a slice of pie on a tray, her hands steady but her heart racing. As she walked toward his table, she caught snippets of murmurs. "Is that really Steph Curry? What's he doing here?" The weight of the room's attention was palpable, but Lena held her composure. "Here you go," she said, her tone calm despite the adrenaline surging through her. Steph looked up, his signature warm smile breaking through the quiet tension. "Thank you," he replied, his voice smooth and kind, making her feel at ease. Lena lingered for a moment, caught between professionalism and curiosity. "What brings you to Harbor Cafe?" she finally asked, her voice soft. Steph chuckled lightly. "Just needed a quiet spot. Heard this place has the best pie in Riverside." Lena smiled, her pride in the cafe momentarily easing her nerves. She turned to head back to the counter but froze when she heard Walter's voice, loud and pointed. "So you're Steph Curry," he said, his words carrying an unmistakable edge. Steph looked up, his calm demeanor unwavering. "That's right," he replied, his tone polite but firm. Walter leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "I've read about you. Making millions while folks like us scrape by. What do you actually do for the people who need it?" A hush fell over the cafe. Lena, halfway to the counter, turned back, her pulse quickening. She knew Walter's bluntness well, but this felt different, personal, accusatory. Steph, maintaining his composure, responded evenly. "I try to give back where I can. Education programs, building community centers, supporting charities." Walter scoffed, shaking his head. "Sounds like a PR stunt to me. You big shots only care about looking good." The words stung Lena, and before she could stop herself, she stepped forward. "That's not true," she said firmly, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "Walter," she continued, her voice unwavering, "Steph Curry has done more than most people could dream of. scholarships for students who couldn't afford college, funding disaster relief efforts, and supporting mental health programs. Those aren't PR stunts. Those are real lives changed because he chose to care. The room remained silent, the tension almost unbearable. Walter muttered under his breath, dismissing her words as he turned back to his meal. But Lena stood tall, her heart pounding, knowing she had done the right thing. Steph's gaze softened, a flicker of gratitude lighting his eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. Lena returned to the counter, her mind swirling. She knew she'd made a bold move, but as she glanced at Steph, she realized she wouldn't have done it any other way. The tension in the cafe was palpable. Walter's accusations hung in the air, his words laced with bitterness and disdain. The other patrons exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. Lena, standing by the counter, felt her chest tighten. She couldn't let this go unchallenged. "Walter," Lena said, her voice steady but firm. "You're wrong." The entire room turned to look at her. Walter raised an eyebrow, his expression both surprised and defiant. "Am I?" he scoffed. "All these big shots do is flaunt their wealth while the rest of us struggle." Lena stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "No," she replied, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Steph Curry has done more for people than most of us can imagine. He's provided scholarships for kids who would never dream of going to college. He's built community centers and supported mental health programs when others turned a blind eye. That's not just money, that's heart." Walter's smirk faltered, but he crossed his arms, unwilling to concede. "And you believe all that?" he muttered. Lena nodded without hesitation. "I do, because I've seen what a difference people like him can make. We live in a world where so many with wealth and power do nothing. When someone like Steph uses his platform to help others, it's not fair to tear him down." The cafe fell silent, the weight of Lena's words sinking in. Some patrons nodded subtly, their expressions softening. Others remained quiet, processing what they had just witnessed. Steph, who had remained quiet throughout, finally spoke. "Thank you," he said, his voice calm but filled with sincerity. "That means more than you know." Walter grumbled something under his breath and turned back to his meal, but the energy in the room had shifted. Lena returned to the counter, her heart pounding. She didn't know what the fallout would be, but for now, she felt a deep sense of pride. She had stood up for what was right. And even in the face of skepticism, her voice had been heard. As the cafe returned to its usual hum, Lena felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. She had spoken her truth, but the weight of Walter's glare lingered. Moments later, Mr. Grayson, the cafe's owner, stepped out of the kitchen, his face tight with displeasure. "Lena," he called, motioning her toward the back. The room grew quiet again as everyone watched her follow him. In the narrow staff hallway, Mr. Grayson crossed his arms, his voice low but sharp. "What were you thinking?" Lena's chest tightened. "I was standing up for what's right," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "This is a business, not a debate stage," he snapped. "Walter and the other regulars are the backbone of this cafe. If they're upset, we lose them. I can't afford that." Lena's heart sank as his words hit her like a blow. "So you're firing me because I defended someone who didn't deserve to be attacked?" Mr. Grayson sighed, his tone cold. "I'll give you a few days to transition. Consider this your notice." Lena blinked, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She bit the inside of her cheek to keep them from falling. She had done the right thing, yet here she was, paying the price for her courage. As she walked back into the cafe, the patrons avoided her gaze. Even Walter looked down at his coffee, his expression unreadable. Only Steph met her eyes, his face filled with regret. "I'm sorry," he said quietly as she passed by to gather her things. Lena nodded, managing a small, sad smile. "It's not your fault," she whispered. But as she stepped out of the cafe, the crisp night air stung her cheeks, the reality of what had just happened settling heavily on her shoulders. She had lost her job, but not her integrity. And in that moment, despite the pain, she knew she wouldn't have done anything differently. Lena woke up the next morning with a heavy heart. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind like a relentless loop. She stared at the ceiling, the sting of humiliation and loss settling deeper with each breath. Harbor Cafe had been more than just a job, it was her refuge, her community, and a place she felt a sense of belonging. But now it was gone. She rubbed her tired eyes and forced herself out of bed. The world outside carried on as if nothing had happened, but for Lena, everything had changed. Bills needed paying, and rent wasn't going to wait. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her shoulders, but beneath the despair, a flicker of pride remained. She had stood up for something bigger than herself. And though the cost was steep, Lena knew she'd chosen integrity over silence. The streets of Riverside were quiet as Lena walked toward Harbor Cafe, her feet feeling heavier with every step. The familiar storefront came into view, but instead of comfort, it filled her with a sense of dread. This wasn't just a place of work, it had been a second home. She paused outside the door, adjusting her scarf against the crisp morning air. Inside, she could already imagine the familiar faces, the awkward glances, and the whispered conversations. Summoning her courage, Lena pushed the door open. The bell above jingled, and the usual hum of chatter quieted. Regulars looked up, some offering brief nods of acknowledgement, others avoiding her gaze entirely. Mr. Grayson was at the counter, sorting receipts. He glanced up, his face unreadable. "I'm here for my paycheck," Lena said, her voice steady but clipped. He nodded, pulling an envelope from the cash drawer. "Here," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. Lena took it, her fingers trembling slightly. Without another word, she turned to leave, her pride keeping her shoulders straight despite the weight in her chest. As Lena turned to leave Harbor Cafe, the low hum of an engine caught her attention. She glanced out the window and froze. A sleek black SUV pulled up, its polished surface gleaming against the morning light. It was out of place amid the modest storefronts of Riverside, and Lena couldn't help but wonder who it belonged to. The door opened, and to her astonishment, Steph Curry stepped out. He was dressed casually in jeans and a hoodie, but his presence commanded attention. The regulars inside the cafe exchanged bewildered looks as he walked toward the entrance. Lena's heart raced. She hadn't expected to see him again, much less here, at this moment. The bell jingled as Steph entered, his calm demeanor contrasting with the palpable tension in the room. "Lena," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "Can we talk?" The cafe fell silent, every pair of eyes now on Lena. She hesitated, unsure of what to say, before nodding. The silence in the cafe was deafening as Steph Curry stood near the entrance, his gaze fixed on Lena. She felt every set of eyes on her, the weight of the moment pressing down. Swallowing hard, Lena nodded, stepping aside as Steph gestured toward a quiet booth near the window. He waited for her to sit before taking the seat across from her, his calm yet focused demeanor putting her slightly at ease. "Lena," he began, his voice warm yet purposeful. "I couldn't leave things the way they were last night. What you did, it meant more than I can put into words." Lena blinked, unsure of how to respond. I couldn't stay quiet," she said softly. "It wasn't fair what Walter said about you." Steph nodded. "And you didn't have to defend me, but you did. That takes courage. Most people would have stayed silent." Lena looked down at her hands, still clutching the envelope with her final paycheck. "Courage doesn't feel very rewarding right now," she admitted, her voice tinged with bitterness. Steph leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle but firm. "I get it. Standing up for what's right often comes at a cost. But I'm here because I believe people like you deserve better." Steph paused for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Lena, people like you inspire me. What you did last night wasn't just about defending me. It was about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. That's rare, and it's something I deeply respect." Lena's cheeks flushed, and she quickly looked down at the table. "I just did what felt right," she murmured. Steph shook his head gently. "You did more than that. Most people would have stayed quiet, worried about their jobs or their reputation. But you spoke up. That kind of bravery doesn't go unnoticed. Lena felt her eyes sting with tears, but she blinked them away. I lost everything because of it, she whispered. Steph leaned forward, his voice steady. I understand how that feels. Sometimes, doing the right thing costs you more than you can imagine. But trust me, Lena, it's worth it. The world needs more people like you. Steph leaned back slightly, a determined glint in his eyes. Lena, I came here today for more than just to say thank you, he began. I run a foundation that helps communities in need, providing scholarships, building programs, and giving second chances to people who deserve them. And I think you'd be a perfect fit for our team. Lena stared at him, stunned. Me? A part of your foundation? Yes, Steph replied, his voice steady. I've seen the strength you carry, the courage it takes to stand up for others. We need people like you, people with integrity and heart. It's not waiting tables, but it's a chance to make a real difference. Tears welled up in Lena's eyes. For a moment, she couldn't speak. The weight of the offer sank in. It wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline. I don't know what to say, she finally whispered. Say yes, Steph said with a smile. The following week, Lena found herself walking into the sleek, modern offices of the Curry Foundation. Her heart raced as she stepped inside, the bright space buzzing with activity. Staff members moved with purpose, their energy infectious. She was greeted warmly by a coordinator who led her to a small conference room. Welcome, Lena, the woman said with a smile. Steph told us a lot about you. We're excited to have you join the team. Lena nodded, her nerves and excitement blending into one. She sat through an orientation that detailed the Foundation's programs, scholarships for students, sports initiatives for underserved communities, and mental health support for at-risk youth. It was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. By the end of the day, Lena had been assigned her first project, coordinating a local community center event. She felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. As she left the office, a small but genuine smile crossed her face. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged. Over the next few weeks, Lena threw herself into her new role with determination and passion. Every morning, she arrived at the Curry Foundation's office, ready to tackle challenges she had never imagined. Her first project, the community center event, quickly became her focus. She worked with local volunteers, organized sports clinics, and arranged workshops for children and their families. Watching the kids' faces light up as they played basketball and learned new skills brought her a joy she hadn't felt in years. For Lena, this wasn't just a job, it was a calling. She saw the direct impact of her efforts, a struggling student gaining confidence through a scholarship, a parent expressing gratitude for mental health support, a child dreaming bigger after meeting their sports heroes. With every story she heard, Lena felt her own strength grow. She had lost her job at Harbor Cafe, but in this new chapter, she found something far greater, a renewed sense of purpose and a chance to create meaningful change. One quiet evening, as Lena prepared for another event at the community center, she found herself reflecting on how far she had come. Just weeks ago, she had walked out of Harbor Cafe, unsure of what her future held. The sting of losing her job still lingered, but it no longer defined her. Instead, Lena saw how that loss had led her here, to a place where her actions truly mattered. The children she worked with, the families she supported, and the opportunities she helped create were proof that standing up for what's right could lead to something extraordinary. Her journey wasn't easy, but it had been worth every moment of doubt and struggle. Lena smiled, her heart full of gratitude and purpose. She had found her voice, and more importantly, she had found herself. Months later, Lena stood on the stage of a newly built community center, a place that had already become a beacon of hope in Riverside. The air buzzed with energy as families, volunteers, and children gathered to celebrate the opening. A large banner read, "Empowering Futures, thanks to the Curry Foundation." Lena gripped the microphone, taking a deep breath. Just 6 months ago, she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I thought I'd hit rock bottom. Losing my job at Harbor Cafe felt like the end of everything I'd worked for. But I stand here today to tell you that sometimes, what feels like an ending is actually a beginning. The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. That night, when I defended Steph Curry, I wasn't thinking about the consequences. I was thinking about what was right. And yes, I paid a price for that decision. But what I've gained since, this purpose, this chance to help others, it's worth so much more than I ever lost. Applause erupted, filling the room with warmth. Lena smiled, glancing at Steph standing off to the side. He gave her an encouraging nod, his expression proud. As the ceremony continued, Lena mingled with the crowd. Children darted around the room, their laughter echoing off the walls. Parents shared stories of how the foundation had already started making a difference. Free tutoring programs, sports clinics, and mental health resources. Lena's heart swelled with pride. She had played a part in all of this. A young boy approached her, holding a basketball under his arm. "Miss Lena," he said shyly, "do you think I can be like Steph Curry someday?" Kneeling to his level, Lena smiled warmly. "You can be anything you want to be," she said, "as long as you work hard and believe in yourself." Later, as the crowd began to disperse, Steph approached her. "You've made a real impact here, Lena," he said. "This center wouldn't have been the same without your dedication." Lena looked around, her gaze landing on the banner, the families, and the children. "I couldn't have done it without this opportunity. Thank you for believing in me," she replied, her voice full of gratitude. As the sun set over Riverside, Lena lingered outside the center, reflecting on her journey. Losing her job at the cafe had felt devastating, but it had paved the way for something extraordinary. Her story was a testament to resilience and the power of standing up for what's right. Sometimes, the hardest moments in life are the ones that lead us to our greatest purpose. If Lena's story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of courage and hope. Together, we can celebrate the impact of kindness and bravery.